Hi everyone, and welcome to this webinar on how performance review can optimize RI witness in your clinic. I'll be going through this short presentation, firstly giving you an introduction to the witness application team and defining our primary roles and responsibilities. I will then explain what a performance review for a witness system entails, detailing the key features of RI witness that you may or may not be using. Following that, I will point out the agenda of a performance review. Lastly, we'll round off with some data from our recent performance reviews and define what we would like to see going forward. So the witness application team was created almost 2 years ago now, and the main reason our roles were created was to provide a pre-sales and post-sales software support for the RI witness application. Myself and Nathan cover the European territory. We provide a dedicated support to all application issues, queries, and requests. We can also help with any hardware-related queries and triage them to our technical services team. We are now a single point of contact for any software queries or suggestions that you may have for RI witness application, also with database and SQL or SQL issues, as well as relative EMR synchronizations. At the bottom here is our shared email address. This inbox is monitored daily by the team. So if you have any questions after this presentation, or you would like to book in a performance review for your clinic, please send an email to witness.emea@coopersurgical.com. We'll copy this email address in the chat as well. So the burning question, what is a witness performance review? Essentially, a performance review is where someone from the application team would visit your lab, either on-site or virtually, and review the current witnessing system. We would start by going through some presentation slides showcasing the new and existing benefits such as traceability, materials, and cryo. We would then walk through your RI Witness Manager software, gather information like your tags used to mismatches, admin assigns, and cycles. From these statistics, we can then look a little deeper into your witnessing diagram and see if there are any missing processes that you can add that will match your current SOPs. We can also help with any refresher training on site. You might have new staff addition that will require extra training on RI Witness. This is a service that we can happily provide. So looking at the 4 focus points surrounding RI Witness on your screen, we want to first drive innovation. We have new features which we can present to you, like embryo tracking in the new version 4 software, which allows you to input your PGT results straight into RI Witness. We also love to hear your feedback on anything that you have that will help you on your day-to-day witnessing needs. We have close contact with the software developing team, so any suggestions, please let us know. You can even pop them in the comment box. We also look at increasing productivity in your lab with certain features like Cryo. With productivity comes overall output, so any unnecessary admin assigns, for instance, can be diminished with a slight adjustment to the witness diagram. Efficiency is another key focus point with such features like linking your consumables with cycles. We can also assist with any refresher training, which will increase the overall efficiency in your lab. Lastly, creating a more automatic approach with features like the home screen configuration and cycle overview board. These are some of the many features that you could benefit from in your lab. So the next 4 slides, we will gloss over some of the features that you can utilize in Witness. First up is the witness diagram. Some of your lab procedures may have changed over time from when Witness was initially installed. So if you're not totally comfortable with making changes to the diagram, we can make those changes for you during the review or give you the necessary training for you to make those changes afterwards. You can add any missing processes in the lab, such as PGT and biopsy pathways. So add any extra capabilities, linking towards the new RI Witness version 4 with draft to publish diagrams. Next up is traceability. So with traceability, you can record consumables against patient cycle. Also have you can scan your barcodes using the wireless or wired barcode scanners that we can provide to you. Track expiry dates. With the new version 4 software, you have a notifications tab as well. So during a performance review, we can also upgrade to version 4, to which that will allow you to have this notification. Also look at product recalls with the materials that you have logged in RI Witness. So Cryo allows you to track samples in and out of Cryo storage. It is again a barcoding system, uses the same barcode scanners as you would do for traceability. Barrie label printer, we can supply various different types of Barrie label printers for this system. And we can also customize labels. So you might have freeze codes, for instance, or you want to put which day the embryo has been frozen on the barcode itself. You can make barcodes bespoke for your lab. Next up is analytics. So with analytics, your lab, you can monitor your overall lab performance, filtering out procedure numbers and comparing them to lab staff and equipment. So monitoring your lab performance, track procedure times, and also you can track procedure times with equipment. So say, for instance, an egg collection takes a little longer than in work area than another, for instance. You can identify there's issues with the equipment, which you can let us know of. And also spot bottlenecks in the workflow. So the agenda for witness performance review. First up, we'll review the current system and potential improvements, mainly towards your RI Witness hardware, to see if any kind of upgrades can take place. Or next up is highlight the missing features, like we just spoke about, the Cryo, analytics, traceability, cycle overview display. Next, we would find an opportunity to upgrade the software to the latest version of RI Witness where necessary. Next, we would then update the witness point diagram to match your current SOPs. And lastly, any sort of training that you might need on individual features or how to use Refresher. Lastly, we have some data from some of the recent performance review visits over the last year or so. The numbers represent 12 months worth of data backdated from the day of the performance review visit. On the left, you see a graph showing tags used compared to number of cycles. You will see that there is a noticeable slope upwards that if tags increase, the number of cycles slowly increase also from lab to lab. This is something that we would expect. But on the right-hand side, you see a graph detailing the mismatches compared to admin assigns. You can see that there is no real trend clinic to clinic. So some clinics have more admin assigns to mismatches, but some clinics mismatches is the higher statistics. What we want to achieve going forward is to reduce the amount of admin assigns and mismatches to a minimum, because with that, we can be confident that with yearly performance reviews, RI Witness can be optimized in your lab. Thanks for listening. Back to Austin.
Thanks very much, Grant. I'd just like to hand over to Dr. Amy Barrie, please.
Hi, thanks, Austin. Thanks for having me. So I'm just going to do sort of 5 minutes talking about my experience with RI Witness. So I've only really ever used RI Witness in terms of witnessing, so I don't really know anything else. So I've been using it for over 10 years, so I'd consider myself to be relatively experienced. But having had our recent performance review, we realised that there was quite a lot that we still weren't using, which was surprising. But we found the witness review really helpful because it kind of made us realise what we were and weren't using and what we could utilise to make efficiencies in our lab. I think the reason that we probably didn't use RI Witness to its full potential or don't yet is because the basis of RI Witness is so helpful in a lab. The witnessing part of it obviously makes a huge difference, makes everything really efficient, and you kind of forget that everything else is there. So it's generally so useful and impressive that the other features that are also really helpful can be forgotten. So we do use all of the modules on RI Witness to some extent, the Cryo, the Traceability, the Analytics, and the Witness Point diagram, obviously. But following the review, we've thought about utilising some of them a little bit more. So the first one that we realised that we could be doing was the scanning of consumables. So having Nathan there to show me the first step and how to get it started really galvanised the change. So at the moment, we manually enter the details of any deliveries onto RI Witness, and we perform an audit every 2 months to see if the consumables that are open in the lab are indeed open on RI Witness. And one of the common things that we find in these audits is that we often get transcription errors with the batch numbers or the expiry dates. So going through the traceability module with Nathan at the performance review helped me understand how we could potentially minimise those non-conformances. So I was always aware of the GTIN number, but I didn't really get it. So it's really straightforward, and Nathan went through it, and we've started doing that now. So that's a really positive step for us following the performance review. The other thing that we realised after the performance review was the home screen configuration. And again, I've always been aware that it was there, but I never really knew how useful it could be or how customizable it was. So some have called it a departure board in the past, but essentially it's a customizable live task list, and it's based on the witnessing that happens in the lab. So there's a bit of legwork to get it set up. It is reliant on every task being associated with a witness point, because that's obviously how it recognizes that you've done a process. But we've made a start with getting this set up. We've started using it basically, and the feedback that we're getting from the team is that it's really helpful to visually see where things are up to in the lab, and how where things are up to, and who needs, if anyone needs to come in and perform a task. It's easy remotely to see when an egg collection has been done, for example. So it's really helpful. We think it's going to be really helpful for reminders. So if an egg collection takes place and the sperm prep is happening at the same time, once the sperm prep is finished, Witness, the home screen, would recognise that the eggs have been collected, the sperm has been prepared, and it would put a reminder onto the board to say insemination due. So we think it's going to be a great visual way to see tasks open in the lab and to be used as a reminder. So the other thing is the Cryo module, which we've only just started using really in CARE Chester and CARE Liverpool, but that really helps close the loop between fresh treatment and their frozen cycle. So it bridges the gap with the electronic witnessing, where the barcode acts as if it was an RFID tag, and makes it one seamless witness event, all the way from egg collection through to a frozen embryo transfer. So we found the performance review helpful. It wasn't very long, and it didn't need to be. I took away some key points that we've started trying to implement that I think are going to be really positive. So back to you, Austin.
Thanks very much, Amy. It's interesting that somebody you would regard as a experienced user often seems to leave the witness system ticking over in the background because it's doing everything you need it to do, but you don't use some of the functionality or even know that it's there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's easy to just think that it's so impressive as a witness system, and it helps so much in the lab just with that you kind of feel like it doesn't really need to do anymore. But yeah, there's loads that it can do.
Yep, thank you very much.
No problem.
And I'd just like to hand over, before I hand over, if there are any questions, please feel free to populate them in the Q&A section, and we'll come to those at the end of the meeting. I'd just like to hand over to Saran. Hi, Saran.
Lovely. Thanks, Austin. Good afternoon, everybody. So my talk today is just mainly about my experience of using RI Witness. So I have the experience of using other electronic witnessing systems. And for me personally, I think RI Witness works so well in the lab that we have at the moment. So we've been using it since 2017, and it's been really good to see how the system itself has evolved. The most important part of RI Witness and first introducing it into the lab was the witness point diagram. Without that, if that does not reflect the lab processes, then the system itself just doesn't work. And over the years, I've seen how just the witness diagram itself has completely changed. So, for example, being able to put the witness system into draft mode means that you can make changes to witness processes without having to wait for the lab to be completely shut, for it to not have any more lab processes going on. I would quite often find myself sat here at 4 o'clock wondering if everybody is finished and so I can make these changes, but actually with the draft mode now, that's brilliant. So I can make the changes without disrupting the day-to-day running of the lab. Also, the training mode for the witness diagram has been really good. So previously you would have to sacrifice some of the tags that you would use for your RI Witness system to be able to test that if you have made a change on the witness point diagram, that actually the changes are correct, and you would have to use the tags in order to ensure that that was the case. Whereas now you can put the system into training mode, and that allows you to test the system without sacrificing the tags themselves. So the initial training for setting up the witness diagram was really good. It allowed me, afforded me the independence to be able to make the changes myself. But having said that, as Grant and Nathan will probably confirm, I do quite often email them and say, I've made a change and it doesn't work. Can you help me? And the team have been really good in terms of their support. They're always on hand, particularly as we are now more online. They've made the effort to, okay, let me know when you're free. We can work through it together. I can test the system. Okay, this is not quite working. What can we do to improve it? So the support from the technical guys has been brilliant, which means that making these changes with the witness point diagram has been much smoother. The biggest thing as well that we have seen with using the RI Witness system is when you can analyze how your processes work, it sort of forces you to address your processes. Are there ways that you can potentially streamline the processes that you have? So, for example, the way that we performed our sperm preparation, we realized that actually there were additional steps that could become more streamlined. And in doing so, we changed the map, which meant that we were then using less tags, and actually it reduced the pressure on the rest of the team as well. It was a much more streamlined process. So without the RI Witness, we maybe not have necessarily looked into detail with our processes to see if there were ways that we could streamline them. So that's been really good. So yeah, as I mentioned, being able to make the changes is quite good. It is quite straightforward, but always good to have technical support behind the scenes. And then in terms of the analytics for what we use in the lab, that's been really good. It's been really useful. Simple things like, we are all probably guilty of it, that if we perform a particular procedure, we may not always necessarily timestamp it, even though we know we should. So actually the RI Witness system allows that the opportunity to go back into the system to clarify when certain processes did take place in the lab. I've been able to look at operator data. So, let's have a look at the workflow. Are there some staff members who are working more than others? Does it create a little bit of healthy competition between us all? Honestly, it does, which is not a bad thing. But it also allows us to look at workload distribution. Is there an issue here? As Grant mentioned in his first slide, is there a bottleneck in terms of processes? We can also have a look at equipment that is used as well more often. And again, if you have a busy egg collection list, you know that one particular flow hood will be in use more than others. And we can also look at the number of procedures that take place over a certain time. So you can analyse, this time last year, roughly how many cases did we have compared to where we have now. Interestingly, I just randomly picked May last year compared to May this year, and I thought, we only did 3 egg collections last year, May, but obviously that won't completely make sense. But it's really good. It allows you to be able to connect your patient workflow based on what you are seeing through the RI witness system. We then had a performance review in August last year, and that was really good. So again, as Amy mentioned, you do become a little bit complacent because RI witness does what you want it to do. It allows practitioners to work a little bit more independently, knowing that they have a robust witnessing system in place. But actually there is so much more that the RI witness system can do. So following on from our performance review, we were able to introduce the Cryo element of witnessing, which is really good. Now we have started to use that. We had the homepage set up as well, which provides us an overview of each cycle of treatment, so that you know which processes have been completed, which ones are next due to be completed. So it provides a visual for us to know what's happening in the lab. And we also set up the traceability. So we have a database that we use at the moment, isn't particularly user-friendly. And introducing traceability into the lab for us has been really good in order to look at product recalls or anything like that related to patients' treatments, which has been really useful. Again, the performance review allowed us the opportunity to just sit with Grant and Nathan and say, look, these are some of the issues that I'm having with RI witness. Is it because I'm not using it properly, or is there a method of being able to make it more streamlined? And again, the support behind the scenes is always really good. They're always keen on staff training, which is really important, because I can train my team, but actually hearing it from the guys who know the system in and out is a lot better. So no, it is, I couldn't be without it. If ever we have an occasion where IT behind the scenes isn't quite working, which means our RI witness isn't working, you do appreciate actually how much we've become to rely on the system itself. So no, the performance review was really useful, and I think it's something should be introduced every couple of years to make sure that we are maximising the full performance of RI witness. So I will hand over back now to Austin.
Thanks very much, Saran. It's always interesting that Grant mentioned bottlenecks, and that was being highlighted with the analytics part of the software. And from my own experience, we found that clinics often you'll find that they don't use, or they use less, certain work areas. And that's often because that there may be a small issue with that work area. Maybe there's something wrong with a stereo microscope, and it highlights that to the clinic. And then that can be actually repaired or replaced, and then that workstation is being used again. So it's actually quite an interesting concept. So thank you very much, Saran. We're just now going to go to the whole everyone. So if everyone could switch on their cameras for me. We've got some questions in the Q&A box, and probably the first question will go to Saran and Amy with regards to how long it took to do the performance review. Was it disruptive, and what would you say was the biggest benefit of having that review?
Well, for us, it didn't take that long. I think it was about an hour, but I felt like it didn't really need to be much longer. I felt like I took a lot from that hour, and enough to go away with and work on. It wasn't disruptive at all. It was helpful, and Nathan came along with his own gear, so he was able to log into all the different stuff and show me how everything worked if I had questions. I did, like I keep saying, I did take quite a lot away from it to improve. But one thing that I really liked about it was learning what was coming. So what was coming in future versions, so that you could see where the system was being improved and how that would fit into the lab. So it's not a surprise, and you can kind of influence it a bit. If they're talking about, if you're talking about an improvement and we think that might not work the way that it is, or it would be amazing, then I found that really useful about it as well.
Thank you. Saran, any?
Yeah, similar. I mean, I think ours maybe took a little bit longer. Grant and Nathan may agree or disagree. I had a lot of questions, and I think it was just making use of them while they were on site, being able to ask all the questions of any niggles that we've had. But no, it wasn't disruptive at all. We organised a time that suited us all. And yeah, no, it was really nice and straightforward. I think because Grant and Nathan are quite familiar with the lab as well, which makes it a lot easier for them and for us as well. But no, it's been good.
Thank you. Saran, you touched upon you thought maybe every couple of years we'd do the performance review. Just a quick question to Nathan and Grant, really. How often would you expect to do that? Every year, every 2 years, every year and a half, or something? Or
yeah, it's kind of a work in progress because we've really recently just started it. But personally, I was thinking probably every 2 years as well, because we've got quite a few labs to see, but also gives a chance for new features to be rolled out, and then once we can come along and introduce the new features, then if anything major came out in the meantime, obviously we probably would schedule like an interim visit just to release the new software and give some training.
I think it's also worth noting that the performance review is a product that we offer to users to help them grow with the system. So it's not a product that we're charging. We supply this to customers to allow them to upgrade the system, to be happy using the system and make sure that they're using it correctly. So there is currently no charge, and I don't believe there is any intention to charge for the witness review. I've just got there's a couple of questions probably directed towards Anchor regarding tracking of volumes and consumables, so ICS needles, catheters, media.
Yes, so today Witness is limited to tracking the lot number or the batch number of the individual consumables. We don't track the volumes at the moment, so we don't know how many milliliters are in a batch, as an example. That is something that we are looking to introduce during 2022. Because we understand that clinics want to be able to control their inventory of consumables to minimize waste. So that is a functionality that we are looking to introduce during next year.
Thank you. And just sticking on that, and we've mentioned GTIN barcodes. We're able to scan all barcodes, but there are some products that don't have a GTIN barcode. Perhaps it's a question to Nathan or Grant. How you would incorporate those into a system.
So for barcode materials that don't have GTIN code or QR code, you can
Correct.
Still enter the lot numbers or the barcode numbers in manually through the interface of RI Manager. So there's still that sort of manual entry that's possible. So for any materials, you can still enter in all of the details into RI Witness Manager.
And my understanding is most of the products now use the international standard barcode or QR code. So yeah,
and our barcodes are compatible with that.
It's a question to Amy and Saran. It's sort of regarding how staff are responding to the updates. Are they finding it easy to use now? Is it big changes, or are they just carrying on business as usual? Saran?
No, it's been really good, and I think from the performance review, because we've introduced more different techniques or expanded more on RI Witness, if anything, it's really upskilled our staff. So as I mentioned, particularly with the traceability, we input everything manually onto this database that isn't the easiest to manipulate, whereas now the traceability module on RI Witness has completely negated that. It makes it a lot easier, much more user-friendly. I think it's just staff training. It's, you know, making sure that they are on board, they are engaged, and appreciate how much easier it will make their life. So that is really important. As long as you have your team on board, the system will then work itself, to be honest.
Thank you. Amy, did you have any anything further to?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's just I think the team are happy to take anything on that's going to make life a little bit easier and reduce risk. It makes sense. So yeah, more than happy to do it.
Thank you. There's a question come in probably to Grant and Nathan regarding how can you use analytics to improve as an operator? What sort of performance indicators can be highlighted by this feature? And maybe once Nathan and Grant have had a chance, maybe Amy or Saran, maybe you'd like to comment as well as a user.
Yes, with the analytics feature, you can look at all the data from the work that you've carried out in the lab. So you could look at all the like the number of procedures that you've carried out, and especially the timings as well. So you might have some KPIs that you need to meet to carry out a process in a certain time. And RI Witness will record all this. Then you can go back later, have a look at all the data, see what you're achieving, and get like an average timing for yourself. Compare that to the rest of the lab as well. So especially for managers, it can highlight if any extra training needs are needed, or just things like that, really.
Okay. From a user point of view, Amy, anything?
We underuse the analytics, and we are really exploring how we can use that to our benefit. And I think that's probably one of the really good things about it, is for a procedure like stripping, for example, that's quite time sensitive, you can really drill down into the minutes and see how long it's taking practitioners to strip a certain number of eggs, how long it takes to do an ICSI, how long it takes to do an egg collection, all of that sort of thing. But I think it could also show if there's certain staff that might be avoiding procedures. So if they've got a favorite thing that they like doing, or something that they don't really like doing, you could pick that up as well. And yeah, as Nathan said, it would really highlight any training that was needed. So we're looking into that, and definitely think it's going to be really useful.
Thanks very much. And just to follow on from that, I suppose, Anchor, do you think, is it possible for the analytics functionality, could it display how far in the past, the historic data, can it display?
Yes. So I mean, obviously, from day one, when you start utilizing RI Witness, the system will start capturing the data points from all the individual process steps in the lab. So no matter if you use analytics from day one, or if you start using analytics only 6, 9, 12 months down the road, it will immediately display all the data from the day you started using the system. I've actually been on a couple of site visits in France and in Germany, where we introduced analytics to a clinic that was already using RI Witness for some time. And the minute we opened up the dashboards and showed them the statistics, they were straight into navigating and being amused, but also curious about all the data value that was hidden in the analytics that they weren't aware of at the time. So yes, it does display data from the day you start working with the system, and it's there's a lot of learning to that, as both Amy and Saran also testify.
So just in summary, so any clinic that is using Witness has historical data that perhaps they may not even looked at.
That's why, at least the examples that I have from the two clinics in France and Germany, where we specifically focus on analytics, yes, they found it useful to start looking at that data. And then I think it will probably take a while, because immediately when you get exposed to all this data, you might get lost in it, but then you find out what is nice to know and what is need to know, and then you can focus on a weekly or monthly routine and to say, these are the reports, these are the statistics that I want to focus on.
That's really interesting. It's a question probably to Amy and Saran. What else would you like to see included in a performance review? Is there anything that we aren't covering? Just your input would be great. Start with Amy, since you're off mute.
Yeah. I can't really think of anything. The impression that I got was that they've kind of got their work cut out for them, because I feel like there might be a lot of users that are underusing RI Witness, because as we've said, it's so useful as a witness system. I couldn't think of anything that could have been included. I came away with lots of things that were going to help, so I found it really useful as it was.
Any input there, Saran?
No, I agree. I was really trying to think of something else that, you know, could you include in your performance review, but honestly there isn't. I think your system is evolving all of the time, and you introduce it into the labs quite quickly as well, so you never really feel like you're behind with what the system is capable of doing.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I know the guys have got their hands full when on the reviews, especially traveling around the UK and Ireland. Something for Grant and Nathan. Are there any typical recommendations you're often bringing up in the reviews for improvement?
It varies from lab to lab with the recommendations that we see, depending on, you know, how much they're using Witness. One of the things that's probably sticks to my mind now is adjusting the witness point diagram. There might be areas where the diagram has been adjusted over the years, but then it's not, that particular part of the diagram is not being used. It's been duplicated somewhere else. So a general kind of tidy up of the witness point diagram is something that we look into almost on every witness review as such. So that's main example from my side.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that often there is an individual that is trained as sort of the prime user, and then they may move on, and then the clinic is left with perhaps a shortfall in knowledge on the witness point diagram. Saran, you touched upon, you were updating the witness point diagram yourself, and the new feature that you can just do that in a sort of isolation before you, and then test that before you push that across to the whole clinic. How often are you finding that you're updating the witness point diagram or finding issues and then having to make those changes?
Not very often, to be honest. I think so. Within our organisation, we are going through quite a big sort of system overhaul of all lab processes. So there were certain things, I think, like for example, when we were using egg activation, for example, we didn't have that as part of the witness program because it was very few and far between. So we would just make witness manually. And it's things like that to think, okay, well, if we are using it more now, let's just include it in the diagram. And with the introduction of the PTA program that we have here, it was accommodating for biopsy practice. So it's as we develop as a lab, it's making the changes to, it's remembering to make the changes to the witness step. And I think because I pretty much know my web pretty much off by heart now, it is always in the forefront of our mind that, you know, I need to change the map, I need to make sure it works properly, test that it works properly. It doesn't work properly, I need to speak to Nathan and Grant. But no, you know, it is really important that without that, it does mean that you are then relying on manual witnessing, where actually you could just use the system confidently, independently.
Thank you. And Amy, just quickly, you obviously work for a group of clinics, and I understand that they're trying to have the same witness point diagram across those groups of clinics. There's obviously advantages to that. If you'd like to comment, how are you finding that? Yeah,
well, we obviously work to the same protocols. So standardising the witness map shouldn't, in theory, be too tricky. But there's a lot. We have lots of labs now, so it does become a little bit more difficult. But I think the thing about the witness diagram is certainly feelings perhaps from users that you could mess it up. So you don't really want to touch it in case you change something that you then can't fix. So what we're trying to do at the moment is kind of have a hub location for the witness map, so that can be rolled. We can edit it and roll it out to the clinics. As a group, we very recently got witness. So there's some much newer some care clinics that have only used witness for a year or so. So definitely still a work in progress with standardizing that.
Okay. And just to sort of follow on from that, really, so for Grant and Nathan, really, is the witness point diagram is often quite daunting for clinics. Should a clinic be updating their own witness point diagram, or would you prefer they waited for a review? And how do you feel?
It depends on the individual, really, because a lot of places will have had training at the beginning to set up the diagram. So if they've been using it frequently since then and they're comfortable making changes, then you just feel free, go ahead and make the changes. Also, if you did break something, obviously we're always a phone call away, so we can come in and help. Or if it's not an urgent change you want to make, then you could just wait for the review and then we'll help you once we're on site.
Okay. No more questions have turned up. So I'd just like to lastly then thank our guest speakers and our panelists, and I hope that everyone that's on the call has found it informative. I'd just like to bring to everyone's attention, our next webinar is actionable results for your patients, the first time using ER-Peak endometrial receptivity testing. And this is on Tuesday, the 22nd of June at 4:30. I'd like to thank everyone for attending and wish you all a good day.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Cheers, guys. Bye.